Hey, welcome back to the Car Doctor Studio in beautiful Anchorage, Alaska. I'm Tim and I appreciate you coming by. Hey, got a quick tip on steering rack and pinion replacement involving 2002 through 05 Jeep Liberties. Book time on this job is over 5.5 hours labor. Requires removal of the entire front differential assembly, axle shafts, lower control arms. But that's what the book says. We don't agree. We're going to show you how to do it in a lot less time by just dropping things down and weaseling the rack out of the passenger side of the vehicle. So hopefully save you some time. By the way, this video is for informational purposes only, and entertainment value is great, but the educational value might not be as great. So don't use us as your definitive resource for proper auto repair procedures and techniques. We're not responsible if you cut your arm off, break your head open, or spill your guts out and catch on fire. So don't do that. Be safe always. Practice safe lifting practices. We got a 2-post hoist here we're going to be using to raise the vehicle up. You can properly support the vehicle and do this repair from below with some jack stands and a jack. You'll need that to safely lower the front of the front diff down. I'm going to show you how we knock these things out in under 2 hours time. And this is a common repair. This particular vehicle came in with power steering noise and looked all dry under there. But what I didn't realize was the left outer boot on the rack end was swollen up to probably that big. And I ended up sticking a pick in there and fluid just spraying out everywhere. So it is a common problem that the end seals go bad. So something to look for if you're experiencing loss of power steering fluid, steering noise, stuff like that. First, I'm going to start off by centering the steering wheel, straight ahead position, and locking that down. I'm just going to use the seat belt, loop through the steering wheel. You can grab a bungee cord and do the same, but you want to lock that down because it is a clock spring in there for the airbag, and you want to keep that centered. Otherwise, if you install your new rack and twist the steering wheel the wrong way, you will break your clock spring. So I'm just going to loop the seat belt through the steering wheel in order to lock this down. Trying to do all this with the camera in one hand, a little bit tricky. Let's remove the steering shaft coupler, the lower part of the steering shaft right above the rack. You got to remove that bolt that pinches that on there. Just using 13mm wobbly on a long extension for this. Now we'll raise things up and start on the bottom. Now we remove both tires. Now we remove the outer tie rod ends off of the steering knuckles. I just hit them right on the face of the knuckle here. And go to the other side and do the same thing. Now let's remove the skid plate to give us access to everything underneath here. Okay, here's where you're going to run into an issue. These bolts have to be removed in order to drop down the front of the axle housing. Well, the bolts are put in so that it interferes with the lower control arm to remove this bolt. So what we need to do is remove the lower control arm mounting bolts to the frame and drop that down enough to get the bolt out. It's going to require first marking the cam so that we can get the alignment relatively close, but in this case we're doing a front end alignment anyway. We're replacing the rack. We got to adjust toe no matter what, so we're going to have it on the rack. We're going to do a full alignment, but I do recommend that you mark the cam position with a piece of white chalk, and that way you have at least a baseline to put it back and get things relatively close. It'll affect your caster and camber there. So you want to do that. So basically we're going to remove this one. We're going to try to drop it down enough to get that bolt out from here, but it may require both lower control arm bolts removed in order to drop it down enough. We'll see. I forget if we need to do both. Okay, at this point I'm going to remove the two power steering lines. I'm going to position a catch pan under to catch any of the fluid, and then remove the two power steering lines. It takes an 18 millimeter. I'm using a crow's foot on a short extension. Just a 18 millimeter crow's foot line style. Just right up in here. We've already flushed the system. We put a new pump and lines on while we were waiting for the rack. So this may be a good time to flush the system, because you always want to do that before replacing a rack or any component in a power steering system. In this case, the return hose is on the bottom. The pressure hose is mounted to the top of the rack, and you can't get them mixed up. They're different size threads. All right, so now I'm going to remove the two rack mounting bolts, which require use a socket on the bottom and a wrench to hold the top. And that way we can access the inside of these differential axle housing retaining bolts there. Carriers. This is a 15/16. Okay, these are 18 millimeter. Get those out of there. So here's where we'll just need to pry down on the control arm. Just be able to slide our bolt out. Okay, we just got to get these rear differential mounting bracket bolts removed. Those are the 18 millimeter. Okay, now we want to remove the oil filter, and the oil filter drip channel above the front differential. That's 2 bolts. 10 millimeter on the driver's side, and a 13 millimeter bolt here on the front face of the diff. Pull this drip channel, plastic channel out. Like so. Oh, I suppose I should really remove the vent hose. I might be able to get away without it, but I got to remove the oil filter. All right, now we just want to pop that lower steering shaft off the top of the rack there. try to get this rack out of the end of this vehicle.
Okay, that should give you enough room to get this rack out of here. Just need to manipulate it, twist it a little bit, work on the ends of the rack, drop that down there. Gently take it out, right side of the vehicle. I just centered the rack, turned to the left or turned to the right, and again this wouldn't have lined up properly. I could have got it 180 out and that would have been a real problem. Like I was talking about the clock spring and the airbag. Now we got to transfer our tie rod ends. Transfer our tie rod ends.
Okay, let's reinstall this rack. Okay, I line up my steering shaft coupler and then put a little blue Loctite on the pinch bolt and install that and torque it properly. In the meantime, I just had the two rack and pinion mounting bolts slip through the mounting spot, but now I'll leave them there, but the nuts aren't on them. Now I'm going to reposition the differential and attach the mounting bolts. Okay, we reinstall our differential mounting bolts and tighten those down. Now we install and tighten our rack and pinion mounting bolts. We'll reinstall our oil filter drain channel above the diff. reinstall our oil filter. Now we'll install our lower control arm bolts. And we'll line the cams up before we tighten them down. Now I clean off the pressure and return hose fittings and replace the O-rings on the end of the lines with the supplied replacement O-ring seals. And install them onto the rack. Now I reconnect my differential vent tube. And retighten the clamp. I'm just going to clean up the area, all the excess fluid. Now I'll reinstall the skid plate. I'm torquing the tie rod ends to 80 foot-pounds torque. Now we'll install and tighten down the wheels. Using a torque stick to just tighten them up, and then we'll do a final torque and we'll lower it down. Now we torque our lug studs. Now I'm going to top off the fluid with Chrysler ATF Plus 4. And then you have to kind of bleed it out. It's going to be prone to making noise and air bubbles until you get all the air out. I try to just run it very briefly after the initial startup, and then add fluid again, and do that several times to prevent, excessive amount of cavitation, which will create a bunch of foam. So we'll try to avoid that. All right, that pretty much wraps it up. We're going to go ahead and bleed this thing out. Then we'll take it over to the four-wheel alignment rack and do four-wheel alignment on it before we get it back out on the road. I do want to remind you that the cast aluminum power steering rack is delicate. The threads for the pressure and return line, you want to make sure that they're clean and the threads are started properly before you just start wrenching on it. Otherwise, you'll ruin your rack and you'll have to do it all over again, which isn't a lot of fun, but hopefully this video saved you a bunch of time. We were able to knock this thing out in under 2 hours, which is substantially less than the book time of 5.5 to do it as the manufacturer recommends. So it's a time saver and something you can do even in your garage, as long as you give yourself time to do it and save some big bucks. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful. For more tips and tricks like this, please subscribe now to the Car Doctor channel, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one.